at sort of reintroducing Vice President Harris to the American people in themes that have been really familiar to those who've been following her for the last couple of years on issues that she's been talking about repeatedly, but now framing it in this newer context of her desire to earn and win the Democratic nomination. So according to that new memo from the Harris campaign that we see here today, the path to victory for them, they claim, actually goes through the same states that Joe Biden's path they thought would have gone through. So they're still talking about those key blue wall states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. They're still talking about the Sun Belt, and they're still saying that essentially the universe of winnable voters here that are the ones that become most important, Vice President Harris, they are insisting, can uniquely try to reach them and talk to them, especially in this moment, because you are seeing so much energy in this moment, because they're also pointing to the millions and millions of dollars that they have raked in, more than $126 million since President Biden said he was exiting the race on Sunday. And that's also translating into new volunteers, tons of voter registration, people who want to work for the campaign. So they're taking that all together and arguing that that sets them up for success. But something else that I think is key here, Jose, is that Vice President Harris has been the lead messenger on an issue that, according to the Harris campaign, they think will be key again in November, and that's on abortion access and reproductive rights. And they are arguing that because in all of the special elections and ballot measures and in the midterms of 2022, where we saw that and how people responded, they are thinking that that is going to be a key thing that carries her through. So expect to hear more about that in the coming days and weeks.
Yeah, I mean, Ashley, so far, the vice president has been leaning on a prosecutor versus felon strategy against Trump. What are some of the potential strengths and maybe drawbacks of that strategy?
So it's instructive to look back at her 2019 campaign, where she also used that strategy. It's interesting. Some of the lines we're hearing from her at campaign headquarters and her speeches so far were lines that we almost verbatim that we heard from her then, also on the stump. And in an ad, so the strengths are she is a prosecutor. Some of her best moments as senator came when she was in the Senate Judiciary Committee, questioning people like Justice Kavanaugh, then getting through his confirmation process, and Bill Barr. And she's not just a former prosecutor, but she is now prosecuting the case against a convicted felon. And people around her have urged me to view this more broadly. It's not just prosecuting the case against a convicted felon. It's prosecuting, as Monica said, the case on reproductive rights, which is a huge issue for her and one where she's much more forceful than President Biden. It's prosecuting the case on the Democrats' vision, as she said in that clip you just showed, for the future versus what she would argue is Trump's backward-leaning vision. And some of the risks are that she, at least the first time around, she was very good at prosecuting that case. She had more trouble articulating an affirmative case for herself and for what she believed and for her ideology and for why she should be commander-in-chief. Again, this is 4 years later. She has some time as the vice president under her belt. People who have worked for her and knew her then say she seems more poised and more comfortable. But they also warn you can't just prosecute a case. You have to offer an affirmative vision for the nation.
And Alencia, I mean, let's talk about that vision, because no doubt she has played a very important role in the Biden administration on the issue of abortion access. And she is also very clearly the prosecutor versus felon concept. But then there's also the issue, Alencia, of immigration, and something that she has had a role in early on. The president asked her to look into the root causes of immigration. That's something that the vice president is going to have to define going forward.
Yeah, and look, this is going to be the opportunity for her to define that. I've worked on several presidential campaigns, and oftentimes they go on weeks or campaigns around specific issues. And so I wouldn't be surprised in the coming 100-some days if she doesn't actually go out and have the conversation around immigration and when she was assigned the Northern Triangle and what she was trying to do around the root cause of immigration. One thing I also want to elevate, too, is we were talking about abortion as well. Vice President was the first sitting vice president to visit a Planned Parenthood health center, a center that provides abortion access and care. She has been a leader on this issue, and that is why so many of the reproductive freedom groups have come out and support her. That on the issue of immigration, as we couch it in a Latino issue, there's polling that shows that Latino independents are now undecided, given that she's in the race, and they're going to take a stronger look at her. There's polling that shows independents and young voters who didn't have their minds made up yet, they were deciding to not show up, are actually reconsidering. And so she's moving the needle on communities that care about these issues, that care about immigration, that care about climate change, that care about abortion, voting rights, criminal justice reform. And so as the campaign defines itself on those issues, as presidential campaigns do, they'll take a week to define their vision for the issue, and they'll do varying events and swing states with key constituents and key groups. You will hear more about this, and I'm pretty sure the American people will move towards her as they hear more about her positions.
And Monica, I mean, Vice President Harris may have less than 2 weeks to choose a running mate. What's your campaign looking at when it comes to that choice?
Yeah, this is something that's going to have to take place fairly quickly, we understand, Jose, and that is why they have already sent out some vetting materials and requests to certain people that we have been discussing who are in the mix here, like Governor Josh Shapiro, Governor Roy Cooper, Senator Mark Kelly. We know that there are a couple of other names who have been discussed and who maybe would have a slightly different way of being vetted or considered, like Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, who obviously has gone through a sort of rigorous testing to be in the cabinet. And then you have other people who are kind of a part of this larger conversation. And according to the Harris campaign, she is looking at a large pool of candidates, we understand. And certainly they are looking at this through the lens of what could this potential running mate bring that she doesn't already necessarily have or isn't going to be as strong on a position as. So that's a part of this as well. But in terms of the timing, this is something that might have to be wrapped up in the next 7 to 10 days in theory, and then really formalized a short time after that, because there's this window ahead of the August 7th deadline for a virtual roll call, which had been the plan for Democrats all along, even before this major change in the race. And so they have to get this settled in the next couple of weeks. So that really does compress the timeline. But in many ways, I'm told by people who are close to Vice President Harris, they're viewing that as something that could give them also a boost, because they're trying to roll some of the energy we've been talking about into that kind of an announcement as well. And then that goes right into the Democratic National Convention in Chicago just a short time after that.
So, Valencia, what do you think the Vice President should be looking at when it comes to choosing a running mate?
Listen, I think she's looking for someone who can, much like President Biden put in her, who can serve day one in the event that she is unable to serve. But you're also looking for someone who actually has a strong record on some of the issues maybe that she feels as though she needs a partner in and a leader in, right? If you look at her partnership with President Biden, obviously, she brought so much to that ticket and so much to this White House, particularly on issues as it relates to women and people of color and young folks, and gave those to her as her portfolio. And I can imagine that she's going to look for a number two who's going to be a partner, just as she has been to President Biden, and the person that she's looking for to be her running mate.
So, I mean, actually, Vice President Harris dropped out of the 2020 presidential primary before even the first votes were cast. How has her ability to deliver a message changed since then?
Well, again, she's gone through the national vetting in that process, not as the presidential candidate herself that she had hoped to be, but as President Biden's vice president. And inside the White House, she was handed a number of issues. Some were quite challenging for her, like becoming, the unofficial border czar. And to be fair, that would have been challenging for anyone. It's a challenging problem that has bedeviled presidents going back to George W. Bush, if not further. But she has grown, especially, I was talking to some people yesterday, they said after the Dobbs decision, again, when she became sort of the administration's point person going out and pressing the case on reproductive rights, they really saw her grow into the role and become more comfortable. She had a lot of staff turnover with her new chief of staff and her new comms director, relatively new, when they came in. That also seemed to stabilize things. So there has been a bit of an evolution of Kamala Harris.
And Monica, what can we expect to hear, meanwhile, from the president tonight?
Yeah, this is going to be a really major Oval Office address for him. When you think about his political life, he's going to talk about why he made the difficult decision to abandon his candidacy. He's going to try to spell that out for Americans in terms of his thinking, where his heart was, where his mind was on some of those things, I'm told. And then he's also going to try to lay out a roadmap for what he thinks he could still accomplish in the next 6 months. So that'll be tough as a lame duck president, but still he's going to spell out some priorities and try to frame this as his idea of finishing the job. So even if he's not going to be able to do that, he will say with another 4 years in the White House, here's how we can do this now. And he's going to sort of try to pass the torch to his vice president, Kamala Harris, as we've been discussing, in terms of maybe some of the things and priorities that then she will take over should she win the White House. José.
Monica Alba, Ashley Parker, Alencia Johnson, thank you so much. And make sure you stay with MSNBC for special coverage of President Biden's address to the nation tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, right here on MSNBC. Still ahead, we'll tell you about the major change the Trump campaign is making to its rallies almost 2 weeks after the attempt on his life. Plus, lawmakers on the Hill angrily demanding answers again about the assassination attempt. The new details FBI Director Christopher Wray just revealed the day after the Secret Service director resigned. And protests now in D.C. as Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, is set to address Congress in just a couple of hours. We're back in 90 seconds. You're watching Jose Díaz-Balart Reports on MSNBC.
Out here, you are the guest in their world. If you listen, you can hear them calling. Answer the call of the wildlife park.
Join us during the anniversary truckload event. Our showrooms are filled with truckloads of top-tier product. You'll find this triple power reclining sofa in 2 colors with the convenience of a cup holder and USB port on both fully reclining ends for only $14.95. Or relax in luxury on this gorgeous leather triple reclining sofa with both heat and massage at your fingertips on the handheld remotes. Also available in 2 colors for only $19.95. Only while supplies last and only at More Furniture.
When I was working in the Senate, I didn't realize that it's the perfect training for the job that I have now. Covering government, covering politics, the complexity of it all. You learn how to explain that and how to live through that when you work in this building. Mastering the detail is crucial to being able to present anything that happens in Senate buildings like this or any of the other news centers that we have to focus on every day.
Fifteen past the hour. Any moment now on Capitol Hill, FBI Director Christopher Wray is expected to resume his testimony before the House Judiciary Committee about his agency's investigation into the assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump. Earlier today, Director Wray testified about a drone that the agency recovered from the shooter's vehicle.
It appears that around 3:50 p.m., 4 o'clock in that window, on the day of the shooting, that the shooter was flying the drone around the area.
It comes just a day after Kimberly Cheadle resigned as Secret Service Director. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas has appointed the Deputy Secret Service Director, Ronald Rowe, as acting director. Joining us now, NBC's Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delaney and Rob D'Amico, retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent and former FBI hostage rescue team member.